Hello, I'm Bob Burke, a member of the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. Today I'm reading for you Dust Storm by Jane McKellips. Squeak, squeak, the windmill blades pinwheeled in the gentle breeze. Clara closed her eyes and felt the warm sun on her cheeks. It was a bluebird spring morning, not a cloud in the sky. Too beautiful a day to stay indoors. She limped her way across the yard. At the corral, a few barn swallows swooped overhead, chirping. "Come here, Sadie," cooed Clara, sneaking a carrot out of her pocket. The mare pranced toward Clara. "Clara, no," her papa rushed out of the barn. "I've told you to stay away. Stay away from that horse." Clara jumped at hearing his command. She put the carrot back in her pocket, leaned on her crutches, and sighed. "That horse could crush you in a second. Go on back in the house." "But, Papa?" "Go on. Now you hear?" Clara swayed across the yard, her crutches leaving little holes in the dirt. Her feet drew wavy lines where they swung along. For the last 3 weeks, she had snuck out to the corral and trained Sadie to eat a carrot out of her hand. Clara knew that Sadie would never hurt her. The horse was a bright spot in Clara's narrow world. Polio had left her legs weak and withered at age 4. She now wore braces surrounding her legs just to stand up, and she had to have the crutches to help her move about. She had become used to them, though. But her papa had not. He would not allow her to leave the farm. That meant no school, no trips to town, and no even going to see the neighbors. Clara thought he was ashamed of her. She let the house door slam behind her as she went inside. Her mama was changing baby Sam's diaper in the bedroom. She had on her good dress, which meant only one thing. "You going to town, Mama?" Her mama said, "Yeah, right after Papa finishes the chores." Clara wished she could go to town too. She wanted to look at those fancy clothes in the store windows. She wanted to watch people walk on the Guymon sidewalks. Guymon is a town in the Oklahoma Panhandle. She longed to see and speak to friends and neighbors. "I don't suppose," Clara said. Mama shook her head. "No, I'm sorry, Clara." "But why? Why can't I go to town?" "You know Papa's only trying to protect you. He thinks others will say or do cruel things to you." But I don't need protecting. I can handle that. I'll stay in the car," Clara said. Mama shook her head. "No, Clara, not today. I'm sorry." She raised Sam up and kissed his pudgy neck. "Billy can stay here with you, though." Hurt, Clara went back outside. At least she would have not be left at home alone again. She would at least have Billy with her. She watched as Papa headed out her town. Papa herded her younger sister, Elizabeth and May, into the old car. Mama got in holding Sam on her lap, and off they went, plumes of dust billowing behind on the dirt road. Billy headed straight for the barn. "Come on, Clara, I know where Daisy had her kittens." She followed her younger brother to some hay bales. "Look down there," he whispered. Clara peeked between the bales and grinned. 5 little kittens meowed and tried to walk on shaky legs. Daisy, their mama, kept guard close by. After petting the kittens for a while, a breeze swept into the barn. Clara heard birds squawking and went outside. High above her head, flocks of crows flew south. Jackrabbits raced so fast across the field, it looked like they were being chased by hungry coyotes. Sadie whinnied in the corral. Sadie was afraid. Billy came up behind Clara and pointed to the chickens. Look! All the chickens were rushing into the chicken coop, and the wind was starting to moan. Billy whispered, "What's going on, sister?" Clara didn't know, but she was determined to find out. She went around the barn so she could see toward the north, and then she was afraid. A long, pencil-thin black cloud rose across the horizon. It was something she had seen before and hoped she would never see again. "Oh no, another dust storm," she yelled. "Billy, shut the chicken coop door. Then put Daisy and the kittens in a box and take them in the house with us. Hurry." Clara moved faster than she thought possible toward the corral. She had to get Sadie inside the barn before the storm hit. The horse could die from breathing in too much dust. She reached the corral gate and pushed it open. She moved to the barn doorway. Giving one loud whistle, she waved the carrot in the air. "Sadie, get in here now." The horse raced into the barn and gobbled up the carrot in Clara's hand. "Good girl," said Clara. She tried to shut the heavy barn door, but it dragged on the ground. She had to push hard and hold on to her crutches at the same time. Precious time slipped away. Finally, the door shut with a thud, and it latched. Clara glanced back at the dust storm. The black cloud had grown tall and thick and billowed across the fields like a massive tornado turned sideways. It howled angrily as it rolled closer and closer. Clara rushed toward the house. 50 feet to go. Her arms ached, but she forced the crutches to hurry. Hurry. 40 feet. 30 feet. Clara had only 20 feet left when the storm hit. Dust stung her skin like poking needles. It was so thick she could not see her crutches. She squeezed her eyes shut, remembering the story of old Mr. Kraft, who had gone blind when he was caught outside in the last dust storm. The ferocious wind threw her down. Clara lay on the ground, trying to hold her breath. Her arm ached where she had fallen. She had never been so scared in her whole life. But even with the storm's fury pummeling her, she knew she had to get inside the house soon or she could die. The house was straight ahead. She would have to crawl the rest of the way. Keeping her eyes shut, she dragged herself along, braces, crutches, and all. Inch by inch, her hands felt their way until they hit something solid. It was the porch. She pulled herself up the 2 steps, grabbing the doorknob with one hand and holding her crutches with the other. She stood up and turned the knob. The door flew open, taking Clara with it. She fell to the wooden floor, bringing the storm inside with her. She felt Billy's hands now around her waist, helping her to stand up. Then they both grabbed the door and forced it shut. Clara bent over, coughing. Her mouth and nose were packed with dirt. Her eyes stung. Billy patted her back. "Are you okay, Clara?" Clara wiped her eyes with a wet cloth that Billy brought her. Outside their kitchen window, a shroud of blackness made it seem like nighttime. Dust still blew into the house, under the door, and around the windows, whistling like a high-pitched scream. Clara grabbed a lantern and lit the wick to provide enough light to see. She told Billy in a hoarse voice, "Go get some rags and towels." After drinking a glass of water to clear dust out of her mouth, Clara ran water in the sink and soaked everything Billy brought her. Then she and Billy stuffed the wet material into cracks around the windows and the outside door. That at least cut down on much of the dust blowing in. Clara's heart skipped a beat as she saw the walls pulsing in and out like they were breaking. No living thing inside would stand a chance if those walls broke away. Both she and Billy coughed in the dusty air. "Bring me the sheets off a bed," she told him. Clara soaked them in the sink, too, and wrung out as much water as she could. Then she pulled a couple of kitchen chairs next to the couch and made a tent out of the sheets. Bring Daisy and the kittens and crawl under here. The wet sheets will block out some of the dust. Sitting on the couch with the lantern next to her, Clara took a sheet corner and wiped dust from her face. The cool dampness felt good against her stinging skin. She did the same for Billy. She trembled, Daisy, with fear, but allowed Clara to wipe dust from her nose and the kittens' noses. Finally, Clara could think of nothing else to do. Now they just had to wait out the storm under the tent. Sand crunched between her teeth. Her eyes felt swollen, and she could barely hear Billy's voice above the roaring wind. Outside, something crashed onto the porch, shaking the whole house. Minute by minute, hour by hour, the storm raged on. Clara's muscles began to ache as she sat on the crowded couch. Total darkness enveloped them when the lantern ran out of kerosene. There was another crash. This time from inside. It sounded like glass breaking. Clara hoped it was not the window. Finally, the wind died down and its roaring stopped. Rays of light pierced the darkness. Clara raised the sheet and peered out. A haze of dust filled the air, making it still hard to breathe. She stood slowly. She had to stretch to ease her cramping muscles. Clara's crutches crunched on broken glass from a fallen picture. She looked around and saw centipedes and other bugs crawling in the dust. "Ew," she said. Clara realized that the bugs had crawled up from between the floorboards, probably trying to find clean air to breathe too. She quickly sat down on the couch. Billy grinned at her reaction. "Mama's gonna hate this mess," said Clara. Billy stepped over the bugs to open the kitchen door. "Clara, look." The outside no longer looked like her farm. It looked like a desert. Dust covered all of Mama's flowers. Dust covered the rows of vegetables in the garden. Dust covered the young wheat stalks in the field. It looked like all the plants on the farm had been plowed under, and tons of dust poured on top. The farm was quiet as a cemetery. Even the windmill was silent in the still air. As she stood beside Billy, tears welled up in Clara's eyes. Then she heard a few cackles in the chicken coop and a snort coming from the barn. "Sadie!" Clara grabbed a wet rag and struggled through deep dust mounds toward the barn. She inched the barn door open. "Come here, Sadie," Clara said. The horse stumbled forward. She sneezed and stood still as Clara wiped dust from her eyes, nose, and mouth. Clara brushed her coat until it shone. Sadie snorted and nodded her head as if to say, "Thank you, Clara." An hour later, Clara cleaned the kitchen table and countertops while she worried about her parents and siblings. They were probably in town when the storm hit. Billy shoveled dust from the floor and threw it outside. Then Clara thought, but what if they had not made it to town? What if they were still in the car? Clara was afraid. She bit her lip. They should have been back by now if they had found shelter. Billy was the first to hear an engine. They looked out a window and saw a road grader pushing dust off the road, and her family's car followed close behind. "They're here," shouted Billy. When the car reached their house, Billy ran straight into his mama's arms. Clara waited on the porch. "Are you kids okay?" Mama said, looking back and forth from Billy to Clara. "Sure," said Clara, "just a little dusty." "I'd better go check on Sadie," Papa said. "She's okay," said Billy, thanks to Clara. Papa was confused. He said, "Clara?" And Billy said, "Well, Clara put her in the barn. Then she closed the door, and after the storm, she wiped dust out of Sadie's eyes and nose, and she even brushed Sadie's coat." "Whoa," said Papa, scratching his head. But Billy had to tell the whole story about how Clara had saved Sadie. and had saved Daisy and the kittens, and really had saved Billy and herself too. By the time she finished, Papa was giving Clara a strange look. At first, Clara thought he was mad at her for getting so close to Sadie. "Come out to the corral with me," he told Clara. When they got there, he put a foot on the bottom fence rail and watched Sadie eat oats from a dust-free trough. "Clara, I suppose you cleaned out the trough too." Clara said, "I suppose I did." He was quiet for a long minute. "Well, we didn't get all we needed in town before the dust storm hit, so we'll have to go back tomorrow. You want to come to town with us tomorrow, Clara?" Clara smiled and stood up even straighter and said, "I suppose I do." The end.